Hello, welcome to part 2 of our walkthrough of the photographer's Ephemeris on iPad. If you followed part 1, you'll remember that we ended up in the Colorado Rockies looking to find the best date to shoot Hallett Peak, here on the left, from Dream Lake in Rocky Mountain National Park. Today we're going to look at how the app appears in portrait mode on the iPad. You'll notice that there are some additional controls and additional data presented that give you some new tools to plan your photography. For example, this grey pin, additional line here, some new information on the bottom right, the slider, and that's what we're going to cover today. But to do that, we're going to go to a new location. We're going to visit the northeast coast of England, and specifically, we're going to go to Bamburgh Castle in Northumberland. Here we go. Northumberland is well known for the number of castles it has in the county, and Bamburgh is probably the best known of all of them. It lies on the coast, as you see, with a nice sandy beach, some rocks here to the north. This is the town. This is the castle here. The grey pin that you see there, that we're going to talk about, has landed there by chance. It didn't know that the castle was there. But the shot that we'd like to take, the thing that we're thinking about planning today, is a view from the north, looking south across the castle. And what might be nice is if we had the rising sun coming up behind the castle. So let's see how we can use these tools to plan that shot. I'm going to pick the primary marker, click on it to select, drag it up to the beach here and drop. And I'm using this slightly differently than I did in the first part of the tutorial, where we talked about putting that on the subject, and you'll see why I'm doing that in a while. So first of all, let's talk about some of the additional information on the map, specifically this line here. It's orange, so you might correctly guess that it's to do with the sun, and what it's showing you is the position of the sun at the displayed time of day. We have our date here at the bottom left, all of the standard information for that date, rise, set, for the sun and the moon, the twilight times, the moon's disk. That's the same information you see in landscape mode across a number of days. But in addition, we have a specific time of day and some information about, for the sun and the moon, of azimuth, that's the direction or the bearing from true north, and the altitude, that's the angle of elevation relative to the horizon expressed in degrees. Positive number means the sun is above the horizon in the middle of the day, 10 o'clock in the morning, and the moon is currently set, it's well below the horizon, 37.4 degrees. Now let's use the slider at the bottom to see what that can tell us, and you'll see as I drag that forward through the day, the time is moving forward here as we go through the day. The sun line is tracking around from east to west and changing color as it gets closer to the sunset color. Let's scrub back and see how that works. There we go. So this gives you a sense of exactly where the sun lies during the course of the day. If you wanted to test a very specific position, by default this slider will cover the whole 24 hours in the selected date. But if you click that button, it locks it down to just cover 1 hour, and that gives you a lot of fine control. It's almost like a coarse fine adjustment, and that lets you move minute by minute through the day and see where the position of the sun and the altitude of the sun is. You'll also notice here on the left the altitude indicators, and they go from plus 90 degrees to minus 90 degrees, sun on the left, moon on the right. Just watch those as I drag through the day. You'll see there's the altitude of the sun increasing. Middle of the day is at its peak, and then it starts to decline as we reverse back towards sunrise. Before sunrise it's below the horizon, and you can also see there's the moon just coming into set, and the moon is setting very early in the morning, 4:51 that day. Let's just scrub through there, and there we go, moon's gone. Here we have the sun rising. The line is there, but it's somewhat faint, indicating that we're probably in one of the twilight times. So we can compare 5:18 in the morning we're just before the start of civil twilight, so the sun should be just below 6 degrees, and indeed there it is, minus 6.3 degrees below the horizon. So that's how you can use the slider. Now let's talk about the specific shot we'd like to take. We said that the best plan for this might be to see if we can get the rising sun behind the castle, which might create a nice glow on the horizon, silhouette the castle. And the best time to do that is not going to be middle of April, because the sun is rising far too far to the north. We really want to look much farther into winter when the sun rises from the south. So let's just quickly move forward to a date in, I don't know, let's go to December. There we are. And maybe this is something we want to do around Christmas, day after Christmas. There we see the sun rising. There's the castle. Let's double click and zoom in a little bit more so we can see that more clearly. And what we want to find out is, will the castle be silhouetted by the rising sun, or will the sun be above the castle? And we can use this secondary pin here to do that. So the grey pin is called the secondary pin, or secondary map marker, and we can use that to find out some information about the relative height of the two pin points. So I select it, I can then pick it up, and I'm going to drop it. You have to pick it up and drag it and drop it somewhere for it to then go and determine this information. So what we've had from that is the results of a comparison in the elevation above sea level from the red position to the grey position. That's what this icon here shows, from red to grey. What that says is the angle of altitude from red to grey is 2.8 degrees. The difference in actual elevation is 135 feet. Distance is roughly half a mile. And the bearing, that's the bearing from true north along this grey line here, is 138.7 degrees. What's interesting is whether the sun is behind the castle or not. To do that, we're currently at 10 o'clock in the morning. The sun is rising at 8:35, so that's really where we want to get ourselves set. So let's go back to 8:35. Here we go. And this is probably a good time to use the fine adjustment tool. 8:38. We're just after sunrise. And you'll see that the sun position line is showing dotted. So let's just scrub forward. There we go. That dotted line shows you that at the time you have selected, and relative to this position here, the sun is actually below the ground as seen from this point. It's obstructed, in other words. And we can see that from the numbers. As I mentioned before, the altitude from red to grey marker is 2.8 degrees up, but at this time the sun is only 1.5 degrees above the horizon, which means that it will be obstructed from view up here by the ground. Now, one thing to note, the elevation measurements reflect the ground height above sea level, but not necessarily the height of any man-made objects. We know, well, I know because I've seen it, that the castle probably rises 2 to 3 times above the height of the ground there. So for sure the castle is going to be silhouetted at this point in time. Scrub forward a little bit, match it up, and you see that yes, indeed, it's getting closer, but it's still silhouetted. As we move past the obstruction there, you'll see I'm going to toggle that off, toggle on, so I can scrub forward a little further in the fine adjustment mode, and eventually we clear the obstruction. There we go, and the line returns to being solid. So there you go, you see that that's probably a good position and a good date on which to have a silhouette of the rising sun behind Bamburgh Castle. Let's take a quick look at what that photograph turned out like, in fact. This was obviously done not in December 2011, but a couple of years ago, and that indeed is on December the 26th. There's the sun, the glow behind the castle. Hopefully that's given you a good idea on how to use TPE to plan some of these more advanced shots where you need to do comparisons of elevation above sea level. You can use the grey pin to get the measurements you need, then use the slider in portrait mode to do a comparison between the altitude of the sun, or the moon in fact, and the relative position that you've set with the pins. That covers it for now. Next time we'll look at some of the more advanced functionality on how to find particular dates for alignments and also how to adjust for the horizon. Until then, thanks for your time.